This is video lecture number 3. Video lecture number 3. Following along on your notes outline, we are at Roman numeral 2, which is Spain. Okay? Okay, now when we think about Spain, before the year 1469, Spain is not one country. Spain is actually 4 kingdoms. Okay? So, looking at the map once again on page 408. Sorry, that's not a very good map. Let's see if I can plug in a better map of Spain. You see Spain is orange there, right next to Portugal. Spain is obviously much bigger than Portugal. That is actually 4 countries. Okay? Now, so why do we call it all Spain, you may be wondering? Well, the people who lived in these 4 countries, or these 4 kingdoms, all shared a culture. They shared a Spanish culture. They all spoke Spanish. They all had Spanish values. Okay? So what draws these people together, makes us call them all Spanish, is not their government, not their political identity, but their cultural identity. They were all Spanish, but they lived in different countries. In a similar way, people who speak English occupy several different countries around the world. You know, English-speaking folks live in the United States, obviously, in Canada, in Australia, in England, in New Zealand, and in many other parts of the world. Okay, that is a cultural similarity. We do not share any real political similarities with these other countries. Okay. Okay, so that is Roman numeral 2, letter A. Letter B, Iberia. Iberia is that peninsula where Spain and Portugal are located. Okay, so looking once again at the map, you see that Spain and Portugal are in the same region of Europe. Okay, Portugal really only has one neighbor, and that is Spain. Okay. By the way, today Spain is a unified country. Like I was saying, after 1469, this takes place. So Portugal only touches Spain, and Spain only really touches one other country besides Portugal, and that's France. Now, there's a little bitty country in between there called Andorra, but we won't talk much about it. France connects to Spain, and Spain and Portugal form this place called Iberia, the Iberian Peninsula. You can even find some similarities in culture between the Spanish and the Portuguese, but they definitely see a difference. Okay? Alright, now, letter C, under Roman numeral 2, Islamic conquest. Beginning in the 700s, 742 AD to be exact, Spain fell under conquest from an Islamic empire. Okay, Spain was accessed by this Islamic empire through North Africa. So you see that North Africa is really very close to Spain. Today it's the country of Morocco that is closest to Spain. There's about 6 miles of water called the Straits of Gibraltar that separate Morocco in North Africa from Spain and Europe. And so the conquering empire of the Islamic, of the Muslims, moved into Spain across the Straits of Gibraltar and secured it and controlled it from beginning in the year 742. All the way up until the late 1400s, Muslims controlled Spain, or at least parts of Spain. Okay, of course, you don't conquer a country overnight. It takes a little while to do that, and the Muslims took enough time to do that. It took them about 700 years that they held at least parts of Spain. Okay, and so what happens with this Islamic conquest is that the Spanish, all 4 kingdoms, are preoccupied with dealing with the Muslims who are occupying their country and who are ruling their country. Okay, that separates the Spanish kind of trajectory through history from the rest of the Europeans' trajectory through history, because the Spanish all have this one big problem in the Muslim conquest. Okay, so the Spanish have a problem. Things are not going so good for a really, really long time for the Spanish and the Portuguese as well. But as they kind of emerge from this period of being conquered by Muslims, the Spanish kind of turn around and look around and they say, hey, what's going on here? Because what has happened in the meantime during the 1400s is, while the Spanish were under the control of Muslims, the Portuguese, under King Henry the Navigator, or Prince Henry the Navigator, he was the king though, they used to call him Prince for his entire life, but Henry the Navigator nonetheless had made Portugal a great country. Now, looking at the relationship between Spain and Portugal up to that time, previously the Portuguese were always kind of under Spain's thumb. You know, the Portuguese are a very small country, kind of out of the way country, and the Spanish were used to kind of pushing them around. The Spanish were used to kind of having their will with the Portuguese. Now, all of a sudden, all of Europe is paying attention to Portugal and what Portugal is doing, and they think these Portuguese have really got something hot going with this new exploration. The Spanish don't like this. They don't like the idea of this little country that they're used to punking out, this little country they're used to pushing around, being so important to everybody else in Europe. The Spanish wanted to be the important ones. Okay, so coming out of the Islamic conquest, this is coming out of the Islamic conquest of Spain, they have a grudge with Portugal. This Islamic conquest finally comes to an end in the year 1492. Now I know we all know that year 1492 as the year that Columbus came to America. But in the very same year, the Spanish overcome this huge problem they'd had for the previous 700 or so years in dealing with Muslims. Okay? In the very same year, Christopher Columbus sails and comes to America. Okay? So the same year, it shares some pretty big significance to the Spanish. Okay? Anyway, let's go on down to letter D under Roman numeral 2. Aragon and Castile were two of those Spanish kingdoms. Aragon and Castile. In fact, they were the most important two. Okay? They were the most powerful two. There were two more Spanish kingdoms. One was called Granada, and the other one was called Leon. They were less powerful. They were less significant in terms of their political power. Aragon and Castile were the two big Spanish kingdoms. Okay. All right. Letter E. Isabella, of Aragon. She was the queen. That's all I got to say about her. Ferdinand was the king of Castile. That is under letter F. Okay. And this all kind of happens in the year 1469. We see these two people ruling these two Spanish kingdoms. And in the year 1469, guess what happens? Dum-dum-de-dum. They got married. When Isabella and Ferdinand got married in the year 1469, what they did was they united their kingdoms. Aragon and Castile became one kingdom. Granada and Leon decided to join in, and they formed the country that we now know as Spain. Okay, a relatively powerful country all of a sudden in European politics. Okay, Reconquista. That is letter H. Reconquista is simply the name for the reconquest of Spain, taking it back from the Portuguese, because Spain was a Christian country, a very, very devout Catholic country before the Spanish came and conquered, and it was always a very, very difficult situation for these Catholic Spanish to deal with Islamic conquest of their country. Finally, in 1492, the Reconquista is complete. So the definition of Reconquista is the reconquest of Spain by the Christians. They take it back from the Muslims who had occupied their country for about 700 years. Okay. Now, letter I. With this reconquest, when the Catholics regained control of Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella, particularly Isabella, she was devoutly Catholic. She was very serious about her religion. She was a churchy lady, if you will. There were not only Catholics living in Spain. Obviously, there were a lot of Muslims in Spain from the Islamic conquest. And just because the Islamic Empire no longer controlled the region, that doesn't mean all the Muslims living there have to leave. Okay? There are a lot of Muslims who remain in Spain after the Reconquista has been completed. And there are also a lot of Jews. The Jews are a group of people who have been kicked around all over Europe for hundreds of years. Okay? I'll tell you what. My 10 minutes is just about up. I will revisit Roman numeral 2, letter H, Roman numeral 2, letter I, Jews and Muslims, beginning with the next video.